Level 1. The Dreamer. You're 11 years old, and the poster is thumbtacked crooked above your dresser. A Lamborghini Countach in yellow, wedge-shaped like it was drawn with a ruler and a grudge. You didn't pick it because someone told you to. You picked it because the first time you saw the scissor door open, you stopped breathing for a second. You don't know torque figures yet. You know the doors go up, not out. You know it was designed by a man named Gandini, who also drew a car with the same doors before this one. And you know that because you read it 4 times in a library book with a torn cover. You collect brochures. Not on purpose at first. You just kept the ones dealerships handed you when your uncle took you along on a test drive he never intended to take you on. You keep them flat under your mattress so they don't wrinkle. You draw the Countach in every notebook margin you own, and the wedge shape is the only thing you can draw correctly on the first try. Your father drives a station wagon and doesn't understand the posters, but he takes you to a car show in a parking lot when you're 13, mostly to get you to stop asking. A man standing next to a restored Datsun 240Z talks to you for half an hour about the inline-6 and the Le Mans-style bonnet latches, and he talks to you like you're not a kid, like the questions you're asking are real questions. You go home and write down everything in a spiral notebook labeled Cars in marker. You don't have a license, you don't have money, you have attention and a very specific, very patient kind of hunger. Level 2. The First Car Owner. You're 17, and your first car is a 1998 Honda Civic hatchback with a dent in the rear quarter panel that predates you by years. You paid $600 for it, cash, folded in an envelope you'd been saving since your first summer job. The clutch is heavy, and the AC only blows warm, and the stereo eats every second cassette you feed it. You don't care. It's yours, which means the leaking valve cover gasket is yours too, and you fix it in your driveway with a manual you printed at the library because you couldn't afford the real one. You learn the difference between a car that runs and a car you understand. You change your own oil and time it wrong twice before you get it right. You replace the clutch yourself at 19 with a friend holding a flashlight and swearing at you. And afterward, you understand for the first time how power actually gets from the engine to the road, not as a diagram, as something you did with your hands. The Civic teaches you the first rule every real collector eventually learns without being told it. The best car is the one you can fix yourself at midnight with parts from a store that closes at 9. You put 40,000 miles on it in 2 years. When you finally sell it, the buyer asks if it runs well, and you almost laugh, because by then you know exactly what's wrong with it, which is a different kind of knowing than not knowing anything is wrong at all. Level 3. The Enthusiast. You're 23, and the car is a 1976 BMW 2002, bought for $3,800 from a retired mechanic who was downsizing his garage, not his opinions. The car has 190,000 kilometers on it and a service folder thick enough to need a rubber band, receipts going back to a dealer that closed in 1994. This is the first car you've owned that has a history that belonged to someone else first. When you drive it, you can feel where the last owner's hands sat on the wheel, the specific give in the seat bolster from a body that wasn't yours. You're not just driving it, you're continuing something. The 2002 teaches you that a boxy little sedan can be more alive than something twice its horsepower. That simplicity is a design choice and not a limitation. That a car can be both a daily driver and an argument. You join a regional BMW club not because you need the club, because you want to hear people argue about carburetor jetting for 40 minutes at a diner. You meet people who've owned nothing but round taillight BMWs for 3 decades, and you realize collecting isn't a thing you do alone in a garage. It's a conversation you join, and you have to show up to be let in. Level 4. The Serious Buyer. You're 29 and your income has finally caught up to your patience. You buy your first genuinely significant car, a 1973 Porsche 911T, air-cooled, matching numbers confirmed by a factory certificate you had verified twice before you'd let yourself believe it. $19,000, which is the most money you have ever converted into a single object on purpose. The 911T changes what collecting means to you. This isn't a car with character. This is a specific machine with a specific identity, one you can trace back to a build sheet. You learn to read Porsche option codes the way you once read comic books, obsessively, for fun. You learn the difference between a correct car and a car that's been quietly, expensively made to look correct. And you learn that the gap between those two things is measured in tens of thousands of dollars and in people's willingness to lie to you, politely. You pass on 2 cars before this one. One had a repainted VIN tag, one was simply priced by someone betting you wouldn't check. Saying no when every part of you wants to say yes turns out to be its own skill, and it's the one nobody teaches you until you've already paid for not having it. Level 5. The Knowledgeable Collector. You're 34 and you have 5 cars. The Civic is long gone. The 2002 was sold to a 19-year-old who reminds you of yourself and who still sends you photos of it on drives. The 911T stays, joined now by cars you chose for reasons that connect to a philosophy you didn't have a name for until recently. A numbers-matching Alfa Romeo Giulia Sprint GT that ran in period club rallies, documentation intact. A Lancia Fulvia that belonged to a motoring journalist who drove it across 3 countries, filing stories from the driver's seat, and you have the clippings to prove it. These aren't just objects anymore. They're evidence of specific lives that no longer exist except in the metal and the paperwork. You start going to auction previews, not to buy, to learn. You walk the tents at Bonhams and RM Sotheby's with eyes trained by more than a decade of ownership, and you can tell within 30 seconds which cars are priced against their actual significance and which are priced against someone's hope. Friends start asking you to look at cars before they buy them. You go. You check the things they don't know to check. You're not professional, you're something in between, and the in-between is where the real knowledge tends to live. Level 6. The Specialist. You're 40 and you've narrowed your focus on purpose. Not because the wider world got boring, because depth turned out to be more satisfying than breadth once you actually tried it. Your focus is American post-war performance, specifically the years just before emissions regulation rewrote what an engine was allowed to be. You know the difference between a genuine numbers-matching big block and a clone built from a smaller engine car, and you can usually tell from across a parking lot. You know the casting numbers stamped into blocks the way other people know phone numbers. You know which factory options actually mattered and which were just marketing, and you know it because you spent years reading build sheets instead of magazines. When you own one of these cars now, you understand you're not just owning horsepower. You're owning a specific narrow window in automotive history that regulation closed permanently a few years later, one that will never reopen no matter how much money anyone has. The community at this level is small, a few dozen people worldwide who care about exactly what you care about at exactly the depth you care about it. You know most of them by name. You see them at the same 3 or 4 events a year in different cities, wearing different jackets, having the same argument about the same casting number that never quite gets settled. Level 7. The Serious Collector. You're 46, and your collection has grown to 12 cars, spread across 2 climate-controlled units because you refuse to let any of them sit in a barn getting slowly eaten. Every car is documented, insured, serviced, and driven at least once a season, because a car that never moves is a car that's dying quietly. You don't believe in collections that only exist as photographs. You've judged at a regional concourse twice now. You've written provenance notes for an auction house that used to intimidate you just to walk into. People in the community treat your opinion as something with weight, and you've started to understand that weight as a responsibility rather than a compliment. You've also made real mistakes. A car with a rebuilt title nobody disclosed. A bidding war you should have walked away from at half the price you eventually paid. Those mistakes cost money, and they cost something else too. Because in a community this small, your judgment is part of your name, and your name is part of what gets you into the room next time. You don't make the same mistake twice. You can't afford to, in more ways than one. Level 8. The Significant Collector. You're 52, and a car you spent 3 years researching just won its class at a major concourse. It's not registered in your name. It belongs to a friend you connected with the car, but the provenance case that got it there was yours, built from 3 years of dealer archives and old racing programs and a phone call to a 91-year-old man who remembered the original owner personally. The win feels shared, which is how this level of collecting increasingly feels. Less like ownership and more like stewardship passed hand to hand. Auction houses call you before events now, ahead of the public catalog, to see what you think of something before they commit it to paper. You've started thinking about legacy instead of mortality, about what happens to the cars once your relationship with each of them ends, whether that's a sale, a gift to a museum, or simply handing the keys to someone who will care for it the way you did. Every car that's passed through your hands has left better documented than it arrived, and that particular kind of pride has nothing to do with what any of it is worth. Level 9. The Legend. You're 61. A car you owned for 9 years now sits in a museum with your name on a small plaque you didn't ask for and don't quite know how to feel about. A documentary crew interviewed you last spring about a design language you spent 40 years learning to see, and it will reach more people in one broadcast than you've met in person across your entire life in this world. You still go to the previews. You still walk the tents with the same eyes you built slowly, decade by decade, and you still spot things other people miss, not because you're smarter, but because you've simply looked at more of these machines than almost anyone left standing, and the pattern recognition never really turns off. You drive all of your cars in rotation through the year, not for anyone watching, because the whole point, the actual point underneath every other point, was always just the relationship between a person and a machine on a road. The Countach poster, thumbtacked crooked, 11 years old, holding your breath at the sight of a door that opened the wrong way. The Datsun owner who talked to you like an adult before you were one. The Civic with the dent that predated you. All of it was leading here, to a cold garage at 6 in the morning, an engine turning over, and the specific, total attention of someone who finally has the time to give it. Somewhere tonight, a kid is looking up at a poster taped crooked to a wall, feeling something they don't have the words for yet. They'll find the words. The car will teach them, the same way yours did.